The question becomes, what do we do to protect those resources, particularly water, but also open space and wildlife, from the effects of development, which will destroy those resources?
Developers say today's technology can clean the water, but many environmentalists oppose this idea. They argue that fragmenting the forest will have a negative impact on the environment, and the natural resources will be lost forever.
If we allow sprawl to continue threading its way and weaving its way into the forest areas, the contiguous forest areas of the Highlands, New Jersey will be the loser for that.
Conservationists have joined forces over the last few years in an effort to stem suburban sprawl. They've sounded the alarm and focused the spotlight on the Highlands. But their fight to protect this fragile environment is an ongoing battle and a race against time. Their overriding concern, preserving pure water. The Highlands are part of the Appalachian mountain chain that runs from Maine to Georgia. Over 1 million acres of forest, lakes, and streams form a natural greenway around the New York-New Jersey metropolitan area. Stretching from Bear Mountain State Park in New York to the Delaware River in northwestern New Jersey, the Highlands region delineates where the pavement ends and nature begins. According to David Moore, executive director of the New Jersey Conservation Foundation, the vision to preserve a greenway from the Hudson to the Delaware rivers is not a new one.
It's been around since the 30s and 40s with various kinds of organizations promoting some sort of a greenway or greenbelt system along the Appalachians. So now we need to find a way to implement that.
That's because this region is experiencing a development boom. Jim Hunter, a lifetime resident of the Highlands and who studied land use patterns in this region, has seen these patterns shift.
And the resources of the economy of this region has in the past been dependent upon the forest and the agricultural resources. That's about to change. What you're about to see throughout the entire region is a switch to residential suburban development, office parks, that sort of thing.
Conservationists were concerned about the amount of development occurring in the Highlands during the 80s, and the first round of battles to save this region began. But it was a quiet war that few knew was being fought, and it stayed a silent struggle until 1988. That's when Sterling Forest Corporation unveiled a proposal to build a planned community for about 35,000 people on its property in New York. Sterling Forest is 17,500 acres of prime forest and wetlands situated on the New York-New Jersey state line, just north of Ringwood State Park. Many conservationists were dismayed by the size of the development plan and the impact it would have on the forest and surrounding areas.
The implications of that type of development could be ultimately, we believe, devastating on our supply.
The North Jersey District Water Supply Commission operates the Wanacue Reservoir System, providing drinking water for 2 million New Jerseyans, and Sterling Forest is an integral part of its watershed. Rain falling in the forest naturally filters into the lakes and streams, then flows across the state line into New Jersey's water supply. Conservation groups from New York and New Jersey decided Sterling Forest was where they must draw a line in the sand, so they formed the Sterling Forest Coalition in an effort to protect the forest's natural resources and keep alive their vision of a greenway.
It's a key link in that continuous last remaining ecosystem. And if that link is taken out, then the last big piece of what this country was, or what this region was at the time of the nation's birth, will be fragmented, broken in half, and we will have lost something precious.
It provides exceptional wildlife and recreational opportunities, and it also is protecting our air and providing clean drinking water for several million residents of New Jersey.
Preserving pure water became the most compelling argument used against the proposed development in Sterling Forest.
The water that flows from Sterling Forest into that reservoir system is fresh, clean water, not polluted, not compromised. If the development takes place as proposed by the corporation, 2 sources of pollution of the northern New Jersey reservoir system will have been developed.
The greatest things about the Wanacue Reservoir is the fact that it's such a pristine supply. So we believe, as always, that the first line of defense is really watershed protection.
But it's one thing for conservationists to say Sterling Forest should be preserved, and another to find the political support to do it. Robert Benewies, Executive Director of the Palisades Interstate Park Commission, is negotiating with Sterling Forest Corporation.
The difficulty with our discussions with the corporation representing the Commission and the state of New York is that we do not yet have funds in hand to allow a purchase to occur.
The reason New York has no money to acquire Sterling Forest is because voters rejected the 21st Century Environmental Bond Act that was on the November 1990 ballot. The failure of the Bond Act was a setback to acquisition, but environmentalists continue to lobby on a state and federal level to keep the politicians focused on this region. Members of two conservation groups, the Highlands Coalition and Sterling Forest Coalition, were encouraged when Congress appropriated $250,000 and authorized the U.S. Forest Service to conduct a study of the New York-New Jersey Highlands. Robert Neville was data collection and analysis specialist for the study team.
We were directed by Congress in the language in the 1990 Farm Bill to conduct a study which involved identifying the forest resources of the region, identifying land use patterns within the region, identifying the change that was taking place in those land use patterns, and then evaluating the effect of those changing patterns on the resources of the region.
The U.S. Forest Service released the New York-New Jersey Highlands Regional Study in September of 1992. Its findings confirmed that the Highlands face the immediate prospect of unprecedented urbanization and change.
That means continued decline in the quality of the resources of the Highlands, continued decline in the water, fragmentation of the forest, loss of habitat for the animals, loss of open space.
But without money to acquire key parcels of land, this decline is inevitable because landowners want a return on their investment.
People accept the fact that there is going to be development at Sterling because there just is no public money for an acquisition of all of the property. There may not even be any available for a partial acquisition. So they understand the reality. And so a plan such as ours that permanently preserves over 76% of the property in open space is viewed as a far better alternative than the property being developed in a typical suburban sprawl manner.
Sterling Forest Corporation spent millions designing what it believes would be an environmentally sensitive planned community. Then in February of 1991, its parent company, Ambase, suffered financial losses and sold Sterling Forest Corporation, along with other assets, to Home Holdings. The new owner is a Scandinavian investment group headed by Trygg Hansa, one of Sweden's largest insurance groups. Did the change in ownership affect the proposed development?
Being essentially from Scandinavia, they have a high sensitivity to environmental issues. And so they were a bit concerned about what this group of Americans was going to be doing. And they were very, very pleased when they saw the type of sensitivity to the environment that our comprehensive plan demonstrates.
The impetus to build Sterling Forest is the financial goals, the economic goals of the owners of Sterling Forest, people who live in Europe, who don't live in this region or have a stake in this region and won't have to live with the outcomes here.
Sterling Forest Corporation is in the process of compiling its environmental impact statement for the state of New York's Department of Environmental Conservation.
At this point in the process, we have had no contraindication that we in fact will not be able to meet the standards that the state of New Jersey has established as to what constitutes safe stream flow into their reservoir systems.
Margaret Duke is in charge of the reviewing process for New York State's DEC regional office in New Paltz.
Anything that's discharged does have to meet existing water quality standards. So in essence, if you're meeting the water quality standards, you're not really changing the character of the water.
Conservationists agree today's technology can clean the water, but argue that a watershed should remain undeveloped because it's the source of pure water which replenishes the reservoirs. They say treatment should take place further downstream to protect this source.
Now it's possible to engineer virtually anything and provide water in the creeks that's chlorinated and sterile, but it destroys the natural habitat, the natural aquatic ecosystem.
But the debate over pure water versus processed water is irrelevant when it comes to getting building permits. What counts is meeting water quality standards set by state and federal regulations.
The Sterling Forest Coalition, almost from the beginning, has advocated upgrading the classification in New York of the streams that flow out of Sterling Forest into New Jersey.
Environmentalists want to know why New York and New Jersey don't have a watershed agreement like the one New York has with Connecticut. New York streams flowing into Connecticut's water supplies are given New York's highest river classification.
If New York were to do that with the streams flowing out of Sterling Forest, that would mean that no new sewage could be added to those streams.
And if Sterling Forest Corporation had to use a costlier method of dealing with the sewage, it might make the development too expensive to be economically feasible. That's why environmentalists have fought long and hard for higher river classifications to protect the watershed.
If we're going to truly solve our water resource problems, our forest problems, our recreation problems, between the two states of New York and New Jersey in the Highlands region, the governor of New York and the governor of New Jersey are going to have to get together and make a concerted effort to cross state lines and resolve these problems and work together in a regional watershed approach.
This state boundary stands as a psychological barrier and a governmental barrier toward decision-making of this nature. In the case of Sterling Forest, a catalyst exists that I believe is going to cause the communication to flow back and forth across the border and to allow these decisions to be made.
Scott Wiener, former commissioner of the state of New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection and Energy, now counsel to Governor Jim Florio, says both states are ready to discuss these bi-state issues.
We have to understand the impact that we have on our neighbors' waters and our ability to collaborate on water standards, on conservation issues, on watershed management, open space management, and the like. It's a more difficult path to get from an interesting discussion to a real meaningful implementation. But it's a path that we're committed to travel down.
Historically, communication between the states has been difficult. During Governor Kane's administration, representatives of New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection made overtures to their counterparts in New York to participate officially in a bi-state study of the Highlands region. They were not successful. But Governor Kane decided to go ahead with the study and signed an executive order creating the Highlands Greenway Task Force at the end of his term. Christopher Daggett, former commissioner of the DEP during the Kane administration, served on the task force.
We saw it most clearly back in 1989 when we were setting up the Highlands Greenway Task Force. We tried and tried and tried to get New York to join with us in that, and finally, out of frustration, just said we'll do it ourselves.
The Highlands Greenway Task Force did serve as a vehicle for opening the door to bi-state dialogue on the Highlands because several New York representatives participated on a voluntary basis. Some members of the task force also served on the Federal Forest Service Study Work Group and found that the wheels of bureaucracy turn slowly.
During both the Highlands Greenway Task Force work and the Federal Highlands Study work, we had difficulty having both the state of New Jersey and the state of New York cooperate and communicate.
One of the reasons both states may be officially distancing themselves from these studies is the fact that the task force report released in January of 1992 and the federal study both recommended a regional approach to the Highlands. The task force went even further in its plan for action, recommending a Highlands Commission with regulatory authority.
There are a lot of people, a lot of interest who today believe that any type of commission that would have the ability to override local zoning ordinances or local planning prerogatives or even private property rights is something which is contrary to their perception of how this resource should be managed.
At present, there are 9 counties and 92 municipalities making planning decisions for their local communities in the Highlands.
We can't afford in New Jersey any longer to have all our decisions on land use simply made by local entities, by local communities. What they do has an impact on the broader communities and the broader region.
After the Forest Service released its study, some members of the work group decided to continue meeting without an official mandate, and regionalism became a hot topic.
Chris Daggett was brought in to chair a broader group, a work group to try to build consensus between the development community and the environmental community on an action agenda to implement the Forest Service plan.
They produced a strategy which included a regional look at the resources and a regional council that would synthesize and coordinate all the resource activity within the Highlands.
The strategy called for the regional council to identify all the land in the region that needs to be protected and all the areas that can be developed.
I come from the belief that the only way you solve these environmental problems these days is to bring everyone who feels they have a stake in the issue to the table. Once you identify areas that you can have some development, you've got to then make it easier for people who want to develop to do that. So in other words, you've got to fix the regulatory process and the permitting process so that if you agree that that area should be developed, fine, let's move that process more quickly.
I think the development community has a tremendous opportunity to participate in saving the Highlands area and building in the appropriate areas. And I think the only way to do that is on a regional level that crosses municipal, county, and state boundaries.
But the regional approach remains controversial. Opponents of the idea view it as just another layer of bureaucracy. Scott Wiener understands their concerns.
But again, I think we have to recognize the reality of the concerns of individuals, whether they be local residents, whether they be local property owners, local businesses, local farm owners, to the concept that somehow the creation of a greenway is going to take away their economic well-being, and most importantly, their family's economic well-being. Now, I believe that that need not be the case, but those are the concerns.
In the town of Tuxedo, New York, where a large portion of the Sterling Forest development may be built, residents say they need growth to stimulate the economy. That's why residents support some development in Sterling Forest.
The majority would like several things to happen. One, they'd like to retain as much of the greenway as possible, and two, have enough development to sustain this town, which seems like it's dying. And hopefully that would certainly balance it out where we'd have a fairly decent tax base and be able to go forward in years to come.
But those who advocate a regional approach make the case that residential development doesn't help the tax base. They say services cost more than the taxes paid by homeowners, so property taxes go up. According to Jeff Tittle, an environmental activist, that's what happened in Ringwood, New Jersey.
When we grew in the late 60s and through the 70s, our tax rate went up through the roof. We went from the lowest tax rate to the highest as our population tripled, and we paid the price.
Ringwood is located just north of the Wanacue Reservoir. The town became a conservation area in the 80s, slowing its growth rate. Taxes are still going up, but not as fast. For years, many Ringwood residents prided themselves on being guardians of New Jersey's water supply. They had an active environmental commission appointed by the mayor. Members reviewed development proposals and advised the planning board if they thought the development would have a negative impact on the environment. The Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions educates its members on how to use the laws to help protect natural resources.
So we give conferences, workshops, we publish books, a newsletter to help keep people up to date on what the laws are and how to use them in your local municipality to protect the environment.
When Ringwood received a proposal to build a power plant testing site, it was no surprise that the majority of residents opposed it. Tittle chaired the Environmental Commission at the time.
Whatever happens in Ringwood will impact on the water supply of New Jersey. What good is it to have all this beautiful parkland and reservoir land if you're going to have power plants and mines and high-density development in the middle of it?
But a backlash against environmental groups has created an atmosphere of intimidation in Ringwood. Signs like this saying, "Wise Use Coalition is coming," started appearing all over town.
Then there was a series of letters to the editors attacking the mayor, attacking the planning board, attacking environmental regulation.
The Wise Use Coalition sent out town-wide mailings vilifying Mayor Craig Siegel and calling him an eco-terrorist.
They said that the environmentalists and the mayor were nothing but a bunch of pagans who sacrificed people on the altar of trees.
Ecologists, to a point, are almost like a pagan religion because they love trees and swamps and frogs. Why don't you kiss a frog instead of your fellow human being? Instead of letting your fellow human being live, make room for the frog.
This backlash escalated from name-calling. An anonymous letter was sent to New Jersey's DEPE alleging the mayor was violating state environmental laws. The allegation was unfounded, but the mayor decided to resign after receiving a number of threatening phone calls. Wood denies his organization was responsible for the mayor's resignation, but does admit to the name-calling.
Of course they're fighting words that are going to create a little bit of excitement.
But words like tar and feathers and pitchfork justice could be construed as intimidation.
When a mayor under that kind of pressure and those kinds of vicious attacks resigns from office, it says to other people in town, why get involved? Why should I go to a meeting? Why should I say what I think is wrong? Because I can get in trouble. I mean, I could be harassed. I could have state agents from different agencies come to my house to investigate me, and a whole range of things. And it breeds a climate of fear into a community.
Because Ringwood is a conservation area, only 2,000 acres are still zoned for development and subject to a lot of environmental restrictions. Wood says the aim of wise use is to get a fair hearing for developers who want to build office and industrial parks on that land.
Okay. And these 2,000 acres should be developed by the people who own it. It is private property. It does not belong to the reservoir. It does not belong to the park system. It is private property.
The wise use movement is a misnomer. If they truly wanted to use the natural resources wisely and have economic return and protect the natural resources, then they would support a regional approach and regional planning, and they don't support the regional initiative in the Highlands.
In this climate of controversy over regionalism and home rule, will the Greenway concept become a reality? Conservationists say it's still possible because New Jerseyans overwhelmingly showed their support of land preservation by passing the Green Acres Bond Act in 1992. This enables New Jersey to borrow $345 million for land acquisition and farm preservation.
Private organizations such as the New Jersey Conservation Foundation have made application to the State Green Acres program for 50% matching grants to acquire key properties in the Highlands that are adding to existing forests and parks.
In March of 1993, Governor Florio signed an executive order creating the Highlands Trust Advisory Board.
The mission of the Highlands Trust Advisory Board is to bring together a cross-section of interest, public interest as well as private interest from both New York and New Jersey, and to begin to assist us here in New Jersey in our strategies.
Then, in August, Florio announced a 4-point initiative supporting a regional approach to protecting the Highlands. His plan is aimed at finding a balance between economic growth and preserving natural resources.
Our strategy in the Highlands is really a commitment. It's a commitment to pure water, clean air, forests, open spaces, and it's a vision of a better future where wise planning complements economic growth. We're not into saying one or the other. We're saying that there is no one without the other.
His Highlands initiative calls for a Highlands Summit to reach a consensus on regional preservation, working closely with the Highlands Trust Advisory Board to set an ambitious timetable for identifying and acquiring open space, encouraging New Jersey's congressional delegation to preserve key parcels of the Highlands as a national forest, and accelerating further land acquisition through the Green Acres Bond Program.
And I think for the first time in the Highlands, we have all the groups that are buying land and all the counties and the various state and federal agencies that look at land planning and land acquisition working together to make certain that the limited funds that we have in these difficult economic times are buying the most critical linkages in the Greenway effort.
But Sterling Forest is still in jeopardy unless money can be raised to acquire it. After the federal study was released, Congress did appropriate $3 million through the Forest Legacy Program for acquisition of land in the New York, New Jersey Highlands region. $3 million is a start, but finding the rest of the money will not be easy.
We're certainly going to be challenged should an agreement be reached to find the various sources of funding to make this acquisition happen.
Binoui says he thinks he can make a good case in Congress for a fairer share of the Land and Water Conservation Fund.
Within the past 5 years, $247 million from the Land and Water Conservation Fund has been appropriated for land protection projects in the state of California. By comparison, $9 million has been appropriated within that same time frame for the state of New York.
New Jersey Congressman Robert Torricelli has taken a leadership role in the funding effort. He's introduced a bill that sets the wheels in motion for the Land and Water Conservation Fund to appropriate $35 million to the Palisades Interstate Park Commission, all of it earmarked for the acquisition of Sterling Forest. But conservationists know it will take a lot of lobbying to get the appropriation passed.
It's going to be a long, hard battle, but I think we've got the resources and we've got citizen support behind us.
We're talking about creating the largest park in the northeastern United States since World War II. We're talking about creating a very large park in the most densely populated region of the United States. We believe that a true partnership between the federal government, the two state governments, and the private sector can be arranged to allow an acquisition to occur. Once these parks are established, members of the public realize that they have done something wonderful for themselves, and I think something wonderful for the people that are going to inherit this landscape in the years to come.
Underwriting support for the preceding program was provided by the Fund for New Jersey, a private foundation dedicated to informed citizen debate of public issues in our state.